Well, hi folks, and welcome to another Tuesday evening live stream. Today I've got Edwin on, and I'll bring him in just a moment or two. Let me just run the pre-show for a little while, just to allow people to come in. Always a busy time, of course, coming into Tuesday evening. Very important show tonight. A lot of issues around property, which I want to discuss, and of course it's in the context of meetings which are happening in the next few days with regard to the government's strategy, questions of the rental sector, and also lots of other things too. Now, just for those people who've maybe not caught up, the dogs are here. This is a doggy cam. Luna and Meteor are sound asleep at the moment, having had their lunch and had a run around, so hopefully they'll be quiet. They do have a bit of a tendency to be more active during the day than during the evening, so who knows. And for those following what we're doing, this is the studio setup now. I've got Edwin queued up over there ready to come in, and he'll be there in just a second. And you can see I've still got quite a lot of stuff going on over here. I haven't quite finished all the wiring yet, but I will do a show in the next few days with regard to the new studio setup, which is now pretty much complete and is running as I'd want it to run, so it's all pretty good. Right, well, without further ado, let me take the pre-show off. I'll run the intro and I'll be back with the start of the main show in just a moment. Well, good evening and welcome to this live stream on the Tuesday evening, the 15th of August 2023. It's Martin North here from Digital Finance Analytics. Great to have you on for a Tuesday evening conversation, and looking forward to this one. I made a rant with Edwin yesterday, and so many questions were thrown up and lots of other issues, so I thought it was worth having a follow-up show today, particularly this week where there's so much going on around the discussion in the property sector, and a lot of mainstream media, frankly, rubbish being spoken as well. So we want to try and defuse some of that. Just before I start, let me just remind you, as I always do, that we don't provide specific financial or legal advice or property advice. This is a general conversation only. The chat is moderated, but I do encourage you to add your comments and conversations. That's all part of the fun of the show. This is as at the 15th of August 2023. I got the date right this time, which is good. Last week I picked up the wrong month by mistake. Now, if you'd like to ask a question, you can do that absolutely by using @WalkTheWorld to make sure that I see the question. And I've also enabled Super Chat, which means that if you want to get your question top of the list, you can make a contribution via Super Chat, or indeed just generally make a contribution to what we do here. Always greatly appreciated, and helps to enable us to continue to make these shows. Right, well, with that all out of the way, let's bring Edwin in and see whether we can catch up with him. Edwin, how are you?
Doing well, Martin. Doing well. Hope everyone's okay. And let's get going with the questions. Let's see what our audience wants to know, wants to ask. And as you said, we are not providing financial or legal advice, but we will provide advice on how to kick bad property managers in the arse.
Very good. And I think it's worth saying, Edwin, that, with a lot of these issues, they are quite complex, right? And sometimes in the mainstream, you get this sort of polarized view of, as if it's so simple and straightforward. Actually, there's a lot of nuance, a lot of difficulty, even to the types of property. Not all property is the same. If you look at the rents, for example, rentals are a real problem for many parts of the market. But I notice in the upper end, in the bigger properties, actually asking rents are dropping at the moment.
That's 100%, Martin. And you look at it across the board. In somewhere the top end properties have dropped in some instances, up to 25%. And this is where your landlords will be open before there's another spike of rental prices in those areas. They will be open to long-term leases. There are pockets of Sydney where you won't be able to bend a landlord or a property manager. It'll be very difficult, but you've got to try. And as you say, there's every area tells a story, every suburb tells a story, every property in itself tells a story, and also a unit in an apartment complex will have a different viewpoint, and you could have 20, 30, 20 rentals in one development complex, strata complex, being managed by 6, 7, 10 different real estate agents, and it'll all be different. So you got to deal with different characters. You've got to deal with different attitudes from the property managers to the owners, to owners corporations. I mean, there's a lot at play. It's not that simple, and the government wants to fix it all with rental freezes and every other thing that every whim that comes in with the next storm, without any real substance or without any real research and understanding of what the rental arena is like. As much as politicians tell us that they grew up in downtrodden areas and they come out of housing commissions themselves, they've forgotten where they've come from, Martin. Simple as that. And yeah, look, let's take the time, make the time to answer any questions that some of the followers and the viewers may have, and hopefully we can assist. We won't be able to assist everyone, but even if we get to assist one and move them in the right direction, it's worth the while.
Absolutely. And let me just go here, because this was actually a very interesting starting point, I thought, which was, Edwin, your empathy for renters is applauded. I too have a sense of impending doom for the near future of Australia. And I guess what we've been trying to get at, Edwin, is that this isn't just a property question. It's actually a social question as well, right? Because we know that there are many people being squeezed out that are struggling to find any solutions at all. And the sort of the social and political consequences are the things that people must also be aware of. This isn't just purely a property discussion. It's much broader than that. It's about it is the future of Australia.
Look, and this is where I say, and I come from the premise, and I think I am allowed to say what I say with regards to many in power have forgotten where they come from. They whinge and moan and complain and talk about and give out these spiels, and they pull out the handkerchief, to wipe the tears off their eyes, reminiscing where they come from. But soon after that function, that fundraising function, they forget about that. They forget it all because they go back to the palaces. When I talk about the rental arena, when I talk about the rental market, it's because I was a property manager and leading property management office for 18 years. I understand the rental arena. Most of my life I spent under the care of my mother. We spent as renters. We lived in a very big home in Gladesville at one stage of our lives. Then we moved to a 2-bedroom apartment with 6 girls, being the only boy in the family. So I've also got that experience, and then to be dropped further out west. Back then was the wild frontier of Busby, and finished my high school year in Busby High School. Commuting from a housing commission development, and then after that moving to the St George area, and then living there. And when I was in my 20s. Had the misfortune of having certain ailments, and there was a time when things went really pear-shaped. I lived in the boot of the car, or the back of the wagon that I had at the time, for 2 weeks. So, and that's where my passion comes. That's where this desire and this passion to help and assist the rental the renters and try to be some sort of a voice for the renters comes from, Martin. I haven't forgotten. I still do a lot of free assistance to offer free assistance to a lot of renters that reach out, as many as I can, within reason. And that's why I say what I say, because unless you've lived it, unless you've gone through it, it's very difficult to understand it. But I hope that in the rest of my life, I don't forget where I come from and where I've been, and that's perhaps my prayer, day in, day out.
Well, I think that's a very important insight, and my own personal journey has been one of ups and downs. I can remember times when I knew that between now and the end of the month I had a few cents left, and I had no ability to get credit. I had no ability to be able to actually control where I was living or what I was living in, and that sense of lack of control, that sense of being right on the edge, it never leaves you. I'm a little bit more fortunate now, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this issue as well, because it is more than just property. It is actually about the way people live and behave and the societal impacts. And I agree with you that, and my concern is that politicians largely play lip service to a lot of this stuff, but they don't actually really get it. And that's why a lot of the conversations that I see and being reported in the mainstream media just seem to me to be, well, frankly, almost two-faced. There's a much more fundamental question. And there was a comment that came in. I'll just put it up now. Looking for investors to start elbows. Rent in a tent business will make a killing off all the essential workers being made homeless in coming months. And that is really the point, that for many people who are doing excellent and important work, their ability to be able to find somewhere to live is, getting to the point of being ridiculous. So we've lost the plot, and I guess that's the foundational reason for why these conversations are so critical.
Well, that's right, Martin. In all this time, I've learned, one of the many things that I've learned is that we have to be proactive, and knowing circumstances that are about to arise, we're either strong enough to confront it and bear it and take it head on, or we try and do whatever we can to dodge it or to prepare for it, whichever way works for you, whatever position you're in, financially or not, health wise or not. We have to be proactive and constructive. And this is what I say, and this is the advice that I and the thoughts that I put out in terms of, I know what's coming. We know what's coming. We all know what's coming. It's been publicised, but it's almost like we're walking around with eyes. What's the term? Eyes wide shut. Walking around, thinking that it's not going to happen. But it is confronting. The signs are there. So when I say go and start talking to your property manager, because you'd be surprised, Martin, how many people don't talk to the property managers or talk to the property managers once every blue moon, or once they appear to do a periodic inspection, or when there's a concern to fix something in the property. So I think those conversations need to be more frequent. I think the relationship between the tenant and property manager needs to be strengthened if you want to have a chance at staying where you are, mitigating any unforeseeable circumstances that may arise, or even getting a reference letter that will put you ahead of everybody else that may even be offering a little bit more than what you are in that next property that you've now got to look for. And this is what's got to happen. Unfortunately, the mainstream media have been culpable in many ways, and guilty of the offence of dividing society into renters and landlords, property managers and renters as well. We've got these divisions. We talk about the social classes in China. We talk about the social classes in India. We talk about the social classes in South America, even where I am. We talk about all these social classes, but yet we've created our own. It's and that's around this whole thing of being an owner, a tenant, or a landlord, and so on and so on. These are the social classes that divide society. And as you say, this isn't just an issue of a monetary policy. It's impacting everybody within the community. It's in all sorts of different ways, and potentially, if it gets out of hand, which I can't see at the moment, I can't see the governments doing anything proactive to stave off what I see as jokingly as I put out is, we're walking right into a revolution just about.
Yeah, Edwin, I think that's a very big concern that I have too. That societal stability is predicated on certain things, and I think one of them is actually reasonable access to reasonable, housing. It's as close to a human right as I see, and yet, of course, what's happened over the last 30 or 40 years is that we've let the momentum through deregulation of the financial system and the privatization of housing. If you look at some, government housing years ago compared now, it's a lot less. And what we've done effectively is outsourced housing to a portfolio of investors. Now, some of those investors are individuals, mums and dads, with one or two properties. They get some tax breaks and things like that. But there are also others that have more formalised it. And of course, now we're seeing building to rent as a thing, right? Which I'm not sure is necessarily a good thing. But what's happened is that the government stepped back and said, it's not my problem, it's somebody else's problem. And so we've got the situation now where so many people who can't afford to buy a property as caught in the rental sector, 1/3 of households and growing. And so there are huge pressures. Now, you've said several times, it's worth talking to your property manager and trying to get a longer term lease sorted out. And in fact, there was a comment or two above in the chat where people said we've done that, and it's actually got 24 months, and that's really good. But of course, there are people who find that quite disconcerting. And I want to put this comment up, Edwin, because this is, I think, some people will be thinking this. I'm very worried and stressful. I'm worried if my landlord requests us to move out, I won't be able to find another place to rent. I have colleagues who already can't find a place to rent or being squeezed out of their apartments due to rent increases. I mean, that is, to me, a really important perspective here. There are people who are right on the edge, and it creates, physical and mental stress as well.
Look, and I empathise with this, with the individual, right? Because and there are many more like this individual that's posting that are out there. But all I can say, or what I can say to this point in this comment is, if you sooner than later, whether you believe or don't believe, the landlord, if you believe, so let me put it this way: it's best to approach this quicker than wait in hiding under the covers, hoping that it'll never happen, and worrying more about it whether it will happen or not. Because if the landlord is going to be selling, they're going to be selling whether you approach them now or later. Anyway, they're going to be selling. I think the surest and the safest bet is to realise that now, to confront that now, cross that bridge now than later. Because from what what is in front of us that is coming later, it's going to be worse later than what it is now. So approaching it now, approaching the property manager, the land, to the land through to the landlord via the property manager, doing it now, I believe it's going to save you a lot more pain than what you're going to be encountering, 3 months, 6 months down the track. Because as I keep on saying, there are no short-term solutions that the government can throw out even after tomorrow's meeting. Even the so-called rent freeze that they're proposing, that the Greens are proposing, and and everyone's talking about, because the headwinds are that strong that even if they start, even though if that comes into be the power to be put into law, into the legislation, at the end of the day, we are not building or putting up any more dwellings. All we're doing is inviting more migrants, which is one of the fundamental pillars that the politicians fail to address. They want to address everything else, perhaps, and skirt around what my personal opinion is the issue is of immigration, and more immigration, and growth to what's already proposed. And now with the concerns that we raised in yesterday's rant around the potential ghost migrants that we are going to end up, there's going to be a lot more pain going to be felt by the general public, particularly in the main capital cities, such as Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, and some extended satellite cities from there, and WA. So, but I would that's what I would be doing. I know it's hard to sort of, it's going to be hard for this individual to cross over that bridge, but I think that the precipice or the potential rapid that's coming is a lot bigger than what we're facing now.
Yeah, I think there is more trouble ahead. I agree with you, and unfortunately, these things have a nasty habit of hitting those less able to defend themselves relative to everybody else. And just on the migration, statistically speaking, if you look at the long term, I think over the next 40 to 50 years, the plans are another 13.5 million Australians coming to Australia, which means you need to build around 5 million properties just to catch up with where we are, right? So that's the sort of the trajectory. Now, having said that, what's happened recently is we had a really big number, I think 400,000 over the last 12 months, and an even bigger sort of move next year as well. So above the sort of the long-term average. So effectively, the Alba government is turning the migration volume up to 11. Now, the reason they're doing that is because it's the only way that they can stop the economy from crashing into a recession. We've already got a per capita recession, and what that means is that over the long term, property is not catching up at all. So if you look at the supply, the proportion of new builds is dropping down because building suppliers are actually falling apart left, right, and centre. The building and the construction sector have the highest defaults and failures of almost any sector in the economy at the moment. So what this means is that we've got this amazing storm where you've got more people coming, and that includes students, high numbers of students. I think I read somewhere that there was 1 million visas been processed over the last little while. Not all of them will arrive next week, but it's a big number. We've also got a lot of people who are actually returning to Australia, but also a lot of other people from around the world coming to Australia. So, for example, there's a big discussion in the UK in the health service where people are saying we can't make the health service in the UK work. We want to go and work in Australia because it's better than the UK. So, people are moving around the place. So my point is that we know the context here is high migration, government policy, lack of supply. And so those are sort of the macro pictures. But I want to come back down to the individual, Edwin, because your comment earlier on about, talk to your property manager. It's interesting. This was a comment that was in the chat, which I'm going to put up now, and I think it probably gives you a bit of a flavour of what some people are thinking. If you currently contact your agent as a renter, all you're doing is bringing attention to your position. Agents then contacts the landlord with your request. Agents inform landlords of the current and near future market conditions, and guess what happens? Your rent won't be staying the same, up and away. So good luck. So it's almost, damned if you do, damned if you don't. But I think you and I would probably say that is partially true. It depends on the nature of the landlord and the nature of the agents. But is that really the way to think about it? What do you think?
I think one of the things that people have got to understand, to run a property management business, it's got to be profitable, and to make it profitable, you got to increase the incomes. To increase the incomes, you got to increase the rents, and to increase the rents, you got to communicate with your landlords, your investors, your property owners, because then you're obviously going to get a higher commission pay at the end of the day. So if people think that conversation isn't already happening, Dusty's got a bridge to sell them, and it just got repainted as well. So these are the conversations that proactive property managers will be having with the landlords, and more to the point as to what's been happening and what's been voiced in the mainstream media is hence why we've seen these rental increases escalate so rapidly over the last 12 to 18 months. Is because of those conversations that have been had, and it's because the pressures that the landlords have been feeling. I believe that you can mitigate a lot of those rental increases because again, I say, if you think that the landlord don't have this in mind, you've got a landlord that owes nothing on the property and is somewhat forgotten that they've even got an investment property. The thing is, if you can then convince the property manager for longevity, because if all these stories are also putting doubts and concerns in the landlords, so therefore you can come to, as I say, heads of agreement and come to equitable terms where the landlord is going to be more at ease, that they've got a longer term tenant, and with agreeable terms of rental increases, whether it be CPI or whether it be a reasonable commercial agreements that are put in place. So if people think that the majority of landlords don't know that they can increase rents at these times, as I said, Dusty's got a bridge to sell them, and if they believe that property managers aren't talking to them, well, Evan's got a nice shiny opera house to sell them as well. These conversations have been had day in, day out, and it's very rare that you find property managers that aren't across this on a month-to-month basis. I think again it goes back to have these conversations now than later, because things are going to get worse. Going back to your point, Martin, with regards to the population growth, I did a quick sums there on the calculator whilst you were talking about that as well. And effectively, what we're going to end up with is we're going to end up the way that we're building, and based on the number of dwellings that we're currently building. And the population growth, we're going to be about 2.5 million homes in the red. I mean, we're not. We and that's if we maintain a steady level of growth. But we know, you and I know, that currently, 50% of medium tier to first tier building companies are trading insolvent. And this is by their own association, put out by their own association, and these are the scary things. And all we're hearing and all we're seeing more and more over and over, week in, week out, is which developer has hit the wall, how many more dwellings are halfway through being built, and so forth and so on. But as I said, if you want to then start really ramping up construction and providing housing in greater quantities, well, you've got to go high rise. And if you go high rise, even if you started digging the ground today, they're not going to be finished for another 3 years. So you've got all these things that are impacting the supply right now, and then the double whammy that we spoke about yesterday with not only regulators bringing in tighter regulations around housing, around the rental properties, and making them compliant to the new standards that are about to be rolled out. But we also now got insurance companies not insuring individual dwellings, homes, because they're over 30, 35 years old. So all these things that are at play, and the cost to get all this rectification work. So again, I go back to better to cross that bridge now than later on, because I don't see a sunrise. I don't see things changing for years to come. In how many years? I don't know. How long's a piece of string? I think the only thing that we would see an immediate change, Martin, and we would see an immediate change in the rental crisis that we're facing, would be the 1.2 million dwellings that are documented as being vacant across Australia. If there was some pressure put on the owners to either put them onto the rental arena, or get penalised for just keeping them dormant and uninhabited for years.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The whole question of vacancies, I think, is a critical one, and the data shows that there are a lot of properties that are actually have been bought, often by people who are not in the country, and are held vacant. A lot of them in Docklands, for example, and why there isn't more focus on that, I'm not sure I understand. And then, of course, you've got the Airbnb type of properties, and you've got holiday homes and those sorts of things. Now, I'm not saying all holiday homes should be forced to rent, but there needs to be a strategy around vacant properties as part of this, in my view. But again, it's another example of where what's happened is that governments are sort of picking a particular argument. So at the moment, it's supply. We want to build more stuff. We're going to have this housing fund, and that housing fund is going to create an income because we're going to invest a certain amount of money, and that income is then going to go into specific housing types. Or in Queensland, the idea of buying property from builders who haven't been able to sell the property and make it available for, say, a 5-year period to people who need property until the builders can, sell it later. I mean, those are some of the things that are being actively spoken about. But to my mind, there isn't joined up thinking about the question of how you deal with the vacant properties. So that's a really, really important point. I get quite cross when I look at all the data, and I know that there's vacant properties in all sorts of areas that just seem to me to be, being held vacant. I think there's a broader question as well, Edwin, and this is one which came up. Debt and Regret made this point, and thanks for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Central banks around the world have two choices: crush the economy with high rates or higher inflation. So history tells us that pretty much every other country and dead currencies, inflation is the way. And I think there's an issue, to my mind, about whether in fact we are going to see inflation coming down. The reason I say that, in addition to what Debt and Regret says, is that of course, the governments have had huge amounts of expansion in their own debt. And the cost of the debt that they've now incurred is massive because rates have gone up. So their ability to do the things that they might want to do is being crimped because of the high rates of interest. So the only thing that they can do is to inflate their way out, because over time, if inflation runs at very strong levels, the absolute level of the debt in relative terms reduces. So they've got a bit of an incentive here, not necessarily to try and get the the economy under control and all those things. They do want to get interest rates down. So I think it's another factor in all of this, and it comes back to, we're talking here about political mistakes, economic mistakes that have been made for the 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and we're reaping the whirlwind. And the question, of course, is, how does this play out? And I suppose, how does this actually, how does it develop from this point, Edwin? Because I don't see any real intent from politicians to change the game other than doing what they've been doing with a little bit of tweak and variance.
Well, I guess from my novice point of view is, do you really want to do too much in your 3-4 year tenure? And can you do anything in your 3 or 4 year tenure without upsetting the the people that are just in there for raising taxes, getting rich, and then moving on? Look, there was a relationship between governments and landlords or property investors or people that wanted to go down that avenue. That's been called a marriage, and now that marriage is going somewhat sour, and the government wants to push it all to private interests, whether they be big commercial interests or individual mums and dads that want to self-fund their retirement, and they've washed their hands of it and have sold off all their side of the commitment to that marriage in supplying affordable housing to the community by offselling the assets and pulling in that revenue for those other fandangled ventures that they've thrown at us. I mean, we do have some spectacular sporting arenas. We're about to have a fantastic some sort of snow resort in Penrith, I believe, in the near future. We've got all these, eyesores as far as I'm concerned, because they're not producing anything other than entertaining the masses like Julius Caesar used to do in the Colosseum, right? So distract and conquer the mind and move on and raise taxes. But all the while, people don't have affordable housing, and the lifestyles are only becoming harder and harder to get by in. So with that, but at the same time, Martin, it's like in this marriage, as I call it, one party on the way out, being the government, just before they exit this abode that they've formed for decades, wants to stab the other party in the back on the way out by implementing legislation that's absolutely going to crush the private sector. And when I say that is, all these new ideas that they've got about in controlling, when all along for the last 15 or 18 years, the governments, federal and state, have not maintain their end of the bargain in providing housing, and here we are. So now the population, the constituents, the Aussies that are in that rental arena are having to bear the pain and it's going to be pain that's going to be felt for years to come. So we're in a, as you say, Martin, we're in a mess, and this thing's going to get messier, and with it's going to come. A lot of social unrest, and it's going to be, and we're going to end up with like the riots that we see, that I saw as a youngster in where I come from in South America, and because the people are just going to be discontent, and all because of these silly policies, and they think that by continuing to have these meetings, talk about how they're going to raise funds, but those funds never really get purposed and used for what they were meant to in the first place. They seem to go off into creating think tanks within those funds, you could say, and which absorb most of the monies that the governments have raised through the taxes, and at the end of the day, we get pittance, and yet the bureaucracy, the bureaucrats, the elites, the politicians end up with more rental properties. I mean, funny about that, funny thing.
Absolutely. Well, I think I've mentioned before, there was a survey done in New Zealand that showed that the average politician had more investment properties than the average resident in New Zealand. I suspect the same is true here, but I can't prove it. And, as somebody I think also mentioned the point that the new Reserve Bank governor has a number of investment properties, so who knows. But there's another side to this argument. If you're coming back to property management and investing, and I'm going to share this one not because I necessarily agree with it, but because I think it's important to understand the other side of the argument as people perceive it to be. Let me just do that. Let's go there and then do that. So this is from somebody who's a property manager and owns a stack of rental properties, and basically, why would you offer a longer lease? I wouldn't do a lease more than 12 months, she says. Tenants don't like it, find something cheaper. Why should landlords provide what amounts to social housing? And don't get me started on DS, rented property. Talk to the landlords, you get screwed. And then somebody in the comment to that said, why should landlords provide what amounts to social housing? And there actually, you've got the two critical issues. The first is, thankfully not all property managers are necessarily tarred with the same brush, but we are talking here about the social consequences of not having sufficient property accessed and available, and the government outsourced it to the private sector. So in a way, it's the government who said, no, we're going to let the private sector deal with social housing. We won't deal with it.
Yeah, look, there's a lot more to it, but Alison, you meanie. What? I think Alison needs someone needs to take Alison out for dinner and just what a mean person. Anyway, not every landlord thinks. Thank God, like Alison does, and being a property manager herself, I would hate to be a tenant in her under her care. Well, actually, I would like to be a tenant in her portfolio, because I would certainly give Alison a lot of stick, because if you live by the sword, you die by the sword, right? So, as I said, there are a lot of regulations that landlords are going to, newer regulations that landlords are going to come under, that are going to be that are going to cripple a lot of them. And I hope to God that Alison's properties comply with the minimum standards. And in the back of my mind, facetiously, I'm hoping that Alison's got properties in Queensland as well as in Melbourne, where the minimum standards have already come in, and there's a bit of grief there with the landlords. But look, not to pick on Alison, but just to make a point, a counterpoint, a counter argument to what she's saying, is that in a lot of the cases, in a lot of the books that property management books that we've managed across the years, you'd find a consensus that landlords will be reluctant to raise the rent on tenants, particularly if they're good tenants, if they're long-term tenants and they're good term tenants, because the counter to that is, as they say, better the devil you know. And I'm not calling tenants devils. I'm just just using that analogy. Then once you don't. Yes, Alison can come with a counter argument, but that's why you've got landlords insurance. But there's a lot of stress, and there's a lot of grief, and there's a lot of time and energy lost in having to rectify the issues. So look, the good thing is that that the majority of landlords don't think the way that Alison thinks. There are some bad landlords, and likewise there are some shocking property managers, and beyond the role that you take on as a property manager, there's also such a thing as empathy, not to be confused with sympathy, and empathy, goodwill, and being if you really want to act to the letter of the law, as property managers, we're meant to be the conduit. We're not meant to be the police officers between the property, the landlord and the renter. We're meant to be the conduit of communication. We're meant to be the arbitrators, as opposed to be the police dogs. We are. We have got certain duties and certain obligations, but there is a way to present those obligations to the tenant that they have, and in turn communicate the same to the landlords of obligations and duties that they have in maintaining a property to now what's going to be termed as the minimum standards as well. So it's quid pro quo, and at the end of the day, Alison, you need to take a chill pill, and because karma's a bitch, and if this is an attitude that's going to be taken, maybe you should just take some time off and go and meditate.
Yes, absolutely. I think the karma comment's quite relevant. What goes around comes around, right? Now, there's a few other questions that have flown in. This one actually was quite relevant. This is from Raymond. Can you explain why the quality of new house construction in Australia is so bad, still using flammable materials banned in other countries? And of course, you and I, Edwin, have been talking for some time about the really, really poor quality of construction in Australia in recent times. And I'll tell you a little sort of anecdote. I came back to the UK here. I'm in a property that was built about 20 years ago, and they've used concrete blocks even for the internal walls. I mean, when would that be done in Australia?
Well, look, if you really want to get top dollar, that's what you build your internal walls on in that what we the old terminology of this is a full brick home or double brick home as we used to say, and you sell it to the communities that have got the dollars to pay for it, and appreciate that, and which is the Asian communities. It's the thing, but look, it's the trend and the nature of quicker builds, lower build costs, cheaper materials. But unfortunately, we manufacture a lot of these materials here in Australia. We've outsourced the manufacturing over the decades to predominantly China, and therefore we're importing it. So we've foregone the cost benefits of having cheaper materials to build quicker and to an extent a little bit more efficiently, and be able to put these properties out on the from start to finish, in more prudent times than what you find now. But the construction issue goes beyond the materials that are being used. Martin, is the construction issue goes to the fundamental problems of land releases, as you and I have been talking about for many years now, and it's only recently that the YIMBYs, the Yes in My Backyards, and and others have taken on our argument and my argument that I raised, over a decade ago, and that is that the LGAs have had too much power and too much control over small to medium tier developments. When I said medium, I'm talking about just townhouses or villas, small townhouses and villa developments, and pulling down the old fibro homes that sat on quarter-acre blocks to accommodate the growth in the population in particular suburbs, and in suburbs that are also bringing high-ticket prices for the homes, such as your North Shore, your lower North Shores, and you're in the West. So you've got, going back to, it's not only just a construction issue, but it's also a civil engineering issue where developers have gone further out into marshlands, into swamps, into high flood areas, where and they've raised the levels of the land by as much as 10 centimeters to get through the regulations based on those LGAs as to whether or not they could build or develop or subdivide the land into residential blocks. Which are your effectively, and one area that comes to mind is the Marsden Park, and the like. So and also down towards Badgerys Creek. So you've got all these things that are at play, and all because of the LJs closer to the central hubs. Basically withholding development. So it's an issue that it's going to continue to plague us, because providing the builders and the construction industry meet the NCC standards, or the National Construction Codes and the standards, and they are minimum standards. Well, you can build with whatever's there, and you see these designs and these dwellings of similar caliber to your property will fetch a higher price in particular areas, Martin, because of the people that demand that. From the point of view of insulation, safety, security, they feel safer, they feel more at ease. It can also be a psychological thing, historical acceptance of that type of build. Me personally, I can, as long as the external walls are solid, I don't mind double brick external walls, or something a little bit more solid, but to have brick or Besser block partitioning inside can be burdensome, especially if you want to change the internal layout of the home. And certainly you've had your little bits of concerns and dilemma in drilling that hole for your cables, Martin.
Oh yes, I had to take it seriously. We got there. But, no, that's and I think I want to come on to one other point, Edwin. And that is the whole question of certification, right? Particularly the private certification processes that effectively it was all outsourced from councils. So we've now got individual private certifiers. And if you look at some of the high-rise development, my view is, I don't know what you think, that in some cases those certifiers have been captured by the developers. So they're not necessarily being as objective and as independent as they should be, and that means that they often let stuff get through that shouldn't have got through in the first place.
No, and then you've got another dilemma because of the current positions that we're in terms of lack of supply across sales and rentals, and where I've been questioning councils, and I'll be talking more about this as I get more as I'm chasing down concerns that I've raised in different councils about properties that are being both rented and sold without occupation certificates and without the purchasers knowing. And what are the stops that are put in place to prevent people from unbeknownstly buying these homes that are not certified for occupancy, and so that's further to the point that you raised, Martin. And this is concerning because you've got tenants living in makeshift granny flats that just don't comply with health regulations, let alone construction standards. You've got homes that have got extensions on them, where you've basically they've extended the roof space of the home by 50%, and they've got no approvals, but yet they're being sold and they're occupied when there's no occupation certificates attached to the dwelling. So these are the things that are going past the goalkeeper. And all because of the housing crisis that we're in across the board with sales and with rentals.
Yeah, absolutely. And one else sort of angle here, another angle. If you think about what is the responsibility of federal government versus state government versus councils, right? What's quite interesting to me is that the supply discussion, which of course is sort of Canberra-led, will flow down into the states and down into councils. The certification issue is a state and council issue, and it almost seems to me that the federal government is sort of carefully engineering a conversation to say it's nothing to do with us, It's all to do with the states, it's all to do with the councils, it's all to do with land release, it's all to do with this and that certification. It seems to me that, in a way, the feds have sort of stepped back, and the hidden conversation, by the way, in all of this, which is the one that I made a show on the other day about the various elephants in the room with regard to property. Of course, the whole question of credit and credit availability, which is actually a national issue. Nobody wants to talk about that. But in a way, Albo's strategy seems to me to be pushing responsibility away and down, and then saying, well, it's down to the states and the councils to sort this out.
Yeah, and this is why you'll have these think tanks, you'll have these this which the Fed will be more than happy to raise funds for, and more than happy to raise taxes for, and then don't dish out the lion's share of what was raised to the states in order to implement why those taxes were being raised for, and they seem to be funneled off elsewhere. To protect other people in other countries. I know I'm going to rub people the wrong way. Some of our viewers the wrong way, perhaps, but which is what we tend to do. It's good and fine. Historically, in all the time that I've been here, we've been very philanthropic. We're a generous nation. But right now, we're the ones that need the help. Our people are the ones that need the help. not the Europeans, and not the Americans. And by no way means do we need to be spending, in my opinion, billions of dollars in submarines that we're not even going to get until 1950. And if and those discussions can go on and on and on. So let's look at tidying up our own backyard before we start trying to fix other people's problems abroad. Welcome the refugees with open arms. Welcome whoever wants to come that is being unjustly persecuted. With open arms. I've got no qualms about that. But right now, we've got people that, as you said, even in your surveys that you're starting to put out, you're going to get a lot more disenfranchised. And as I said in the post of January, 1st of January this year, and that is that we will be seeing more tent cities and more caravan cities across all cities of Australia, if we don't start tackling this issue, right now, and if people think that this is only happening in the western suburbs or in the southwest region, they've got rocks in their head, because there'll be a lot more pain happening in the affluent parts of Sydney as well, and in your northern beaches and in your north shores and in your lower north shores, because that is where the cost of living is also escalating more and more, it's something that is going to touch families and lives across all suburbs, not just the wild west, as many would like to think it is.
Absolutely. Well, it is about priorities and relative priorities, and my own perspective is that the relative priorities are actually set wrong at the moment, and we seem to be spending a lot of money on stuff that it might politically look good, or it might actually align with international interests, but there are some really, really important issues at home which are not being addressed adequately, in my view. Now, Edwin, one of the interesting questions that came up in the comments to your previous show, the one we did yesterday, somebody asked about the mortgage cliff, and I might just talk about that briefly. What's happening with the mortgage cliff? You guys were drumming up this for a while, and now I'm talking about it. It's not true. We are talking about it. So Phil Lowe last Friday, when he was in front of the House Economic Committee, said roughly half of the loans have been reset, but there's another 1 million to be reset in the next few months ahead. Of course, the banks are actually flexing terms on mortgages, extending the period, going interest only for some borrowers to try and help them through. But in my mortgage stress analysis, I am seeing that mortgage stress translating to higher levels of stress, never been higher. Go back and look at the show they did on that. And the final point, of course, that this mortgage cliff, it's not really a cliff, because what it means is that people then start effectively having to pay more, but they can carry that for a certain period of time. But of course, eventually they're around a runway. So this is going to be more of a sort of a glide rather than a cliff, in my view. But I guess the broader question, economically speaking, Edwin, is that with the high interest rates, everyone was expecting that prices would drop. We saw prices slide, but then start to rise again. And I think that you and I probably both think that what part of this is doing is being driven by the lack of supply and the very low listings, and the fact that people still want to acquire property.
Definitely, and this is where the WeChat chatterers have been very vocal about what they're planning to do. And let's not forget what we've also been saying for a long time now, is the Sydney. If you're just looking at the Sydney market, it's not that big in comparison to other cities around the world. The whole of Australian market can fit into one city overseas, just about, in terms of volumes and in terms of properties for sale and transactions on a weekly or on a yearly basis. So we're not a very big market at all. And a lot of people seem to, this is what we said and touched on not too long ago, and that is that we also paint the people that aren't able to borrow as much now as what they would have been able to borrow a year ago or 2 years ago with the same paintbrush as everybody else. We've said that there are a lot of people that have been sitting on the sidelines, whether they like to admit it or not. They've been sitting on the sidelines waiting to buy, waiting for this, for this elusive mortgage cliff that the mainstream media talks about, without looking at the numbers and without looking at what the patterns have been, the migratory patterns from one asset class to another have been among the all Asian communities and Southeast Asian communities as well. So that's, we can talk about how it's harder to borrow money now. We can talk about the stress that a lot of house owners that have got mortgages are under, and how great that stress is. But we've been talking for a while about the difference between mortgage stress, mortgage delinquency, and mortgagee in possession. So a lot of people have convoluted mortgagee in possession with mortgage stress. Mm. The other thing is we've had shifts and changes with this immigration policy has opened the doors for a lot of people from different nations that didn't look at Australia as an attractive destination because of the shit show that America's in at the moment, because of where Europe is in at the moment, and has been for a couple of years now. We have become very attractive to a lot of wealthy people from abroad, and the new migrants that are coming in, as I've been sharing, are not your typical blue collar migrants like my father, my family was in the 70s. That are people, or even as early as 5 years ago, coming in with just a suitcase and in maybe tens of thousands of dollars just to start a life here. But these new migrants that are coming in, and the doors are being opened onto, and we alluded to for over a year, is migrants that are wealthy, that are, although they may be Indian, although they may be Southeast Asian, they may be Malaysian, they may be they're coming from America, they're coming from Canada, they're coming from Europe, but they're coming over with 30, 40, 50 percent deposits, enough money to put 30, 40, 50% deposits in for a home. So they've got no issues with borrowing capacity. And again, we go back to the numbers on market have been relatively low, and this is why I'm paying very close attention to what the WeChat chatterers are saying as to what they see as the second wave of the buying spree. And there's two types of WeChat chatterers. There's the overseas WeChat chatterers that we talk about, and there's also the local WeChat chatterers. The local WeChat chatterers are more prolific, have been more prolific and more have been more hungry, and have been hungry in have bigger appetite in buying property for investment purposes, to convert the properties into the budget accommodation scenarios, and also to park the money for longer periods, regardless of what yield they get. And we forget that the local WeChat chatterers didn't just come to Australia 3 months ago or 6 months ago. They've been here for we're talking about WeChat chatterers that are first, second, third generation Aussies themselves. It just so happens that they're on WeChat, and they're of Asian background, Chinese background, and they're on WeChat, and they form these groups, and following these property investment groups on WeChat is fascinating to see how hungry and what that appetite has been, and to see the transition, as I said, from when we talked about what the pandemic did to them in 21 and 22, and how they turned their back on your traditional your traditional business operations such as shops, takeaway shops, convenience stores, and hospitality and retail. They've turned their back on that, and they've decided to go full on, all in on property, and that changed the dynamics as well. So even the mainstream have got a lot of the conversations wrong, to a point where they allude that all the Asian people that turn up to an auction, and you see these photographs on the post that they put up, you see all these Asian people. It's almost like they're making out that they're all foreigners, and they're bringing in hot money from directly from China, when in fact most of them would be first and second generation Chinese Australians that have, as I said, they've just changed the perspective on where they're going to park the money, put the money, and where they believe it's going to be safe, medium term and short, medium and long term. So they're the conversations that we've been sharing about. The mortgage cliff, we've said that from before the election, we said watch this space, because there will be a number of levers that the government, that the newly elected government will be pulling, whether it be the libs and the labs. It happened to be the labs, but the fix was in already. And we talked about it. So yeah, I don't agree with that premise that we've stopped talking about it. We've just been giving a week by week reports and trying to clarify a lot of the jargon that's put out there, and the false sentiments that are put out there across the Twitterazzi and the mainstream and everybody else that would hope otherwise. I think I don't know. I don't know about you, Martin, but I think we've been very clear on the conversations that we've been having, and just giving people the telltale signs to watch and see, and what we've been saying and has been playing out. So no, I don't think we've stopped talking about it at all.
No, I agree. And the point, of course, with all of this, and it's actually goes quite nicely into this question, which was another one that was on the comments on our previous show, and it was to do with the actual sales versus clearance rates. And so the question was about, are they meaningful or not? And also questions about median prices. Median prices are up, yes, no, etc. But surely, what's going on? And we keep coming back to this critical point that you can't really just look at aggregate data like sales versus clearance rates or median prices, because you have to go granular to understand what's going on. And things are not the same in all postcodes, are they, Edwin? And a lot of the mainstream stuff that's going on at the moment, just pick the high level numbers and then build a thesis about property booming or whatever, or properties crashing or whatever. The truth is much, much more complicated than that.
Look, it is, and people have really got to start sifting through the proverbial shit that gets put on Twitter, right? And you've got to start dissecting a lot of these posts very, very carefully, and also in the large part what the mainstream media put out there. Look, I'll give you something off the top of my head. So I've got a property that, let's say I want $2 million for. It's on 1,000 square meters of land, and the building is a four bedroom standard, say, Masterton home on it that was just built a year ago. I'm asking for $2 million. So that's my expectation. That's what I would like, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to get it, right? because the way you would approach that that sale is, okay, what's the square meter rate going for a vacant block of land or a detonate and rebuild purchase, and in other words, an old home that you're just going to demolish and rebuild on. What's a block of? Because you can, it's not hard to come to giving you the average value of a square meter of land in each suburb. What is it going to cost me to build? So if the average square meter block of land, the average square meter block of land is, say, 500. Well, I've got 1,000 square meters. Well, there's your price point, right? There's your starting point. That's your average, which is what, 500,000 for that block of land, right? So if Marsden homes are currently based on the square meterage of the home, based on what I've got, all the bells and whistles, it's going to be, it's a 100 square meter home, and the current rate is 4,000 a square meter, plus a bit here, plus a bit there. But on average, it's 4,000 a square meter. It's a relatively small 4-bedroom home, 100 square meters, but just to keep it to the mathematics. So there's 400,000, correct? So when you do the math, we're up to 900,000, but I'm asking 2 million, and I could ask 3 million. I could ask whatever I want to ask. It doesn't mean that I am going to get it. And this is where people have got to. This is where these medium house prices and everything, like you say, you've got to really go granular and understand how much is the square meter of land, how much could you build a house for, what's a replacement cost, inclusions, fixtures, fittings, blah blah blah, renovation works, this that and the other, before you start making any notion of what, or whether the market is going down or whether the market is going up. So what we're seeing in a lot of these averages that play out, and what the media and the Twitterati go on about, oftentimes mean nothing unless you look at things granular. Because when you start dissecting and pushing away vendors' expectations to reality and what got sold, there may be a similar block of land with a similar house next door to mine that made a fetch 1.8 million. But when we start digging a bit deeper, we find out that the neighbour next door was related to Donald Trump, and it had an 18-karat gold shedder in her as well. So you've got to start looking at all these things, Martin, in order to really understand what's happening in the area. Sooner than later, maybe later, my house may be worth $2 million when the land values go up because of supply and demand, and because of all of a sudden I've got a WeChat chatter community, right? Building a shopping center and everything else in the retirement village a block away from where I live, and happy me, because Xi Jinping's brother wants to buy it and wants to put his wife's mother living in close proximity. Who the hell knows? So this is where a lot of these numbers, a lot of these percentages, I take the piss out of them, because in some of the posts on Twitter and on other social media platforms, because it's just emotion. And this is what you've got to filter through. A lot of this emotion, a lot of this jargon, a lot of this chest beating, or these, because if they write the truth is very logical. The truth is very, to a point, is very black and white. It's really sketchy. And when you understand and go to those basics, you get a better understanding of what is happening. But when you paint everything with percentages, it just distorts the real notion and what's really happening on the ground. I mean, the latest is people that comment, reporters that do reports on auctions and on auction clearance numbers, and the Twitterati that do reports on auctions, all sitting from home looking at a screen, not really knowing why and how a property could go for so high or could go for so low, when another property went the opposite way only weeks ago, that was a few doors down the road, without understanding the nature of easements, the nature of building proposals, the nature of rezoning, and all these things. So yeah, I take it with a grain of salt, Martin, and it's more for me and Dusty when we look at these averages and percentages. We sort of, it's we look at all that on Friday, because to us Friday is Giggle Friday.
Yeah, and you have got this little comment about following the money, right? And I want to remind everybody that a lot of the information which is made available by the property portals is paid for ultimately by the real estate sector, directly or indirectly. And so some of the articles on some of those property portals might actually not necessarily be representing the full story about what's going on, because it might not be in the commercial interest of those organisations to do that. And even some of the statistical data that's being released, when you actually ask, well, who's it come from, and what is their economic model, you might want to say, well, is the data accurate and meaningful? And sometimes I question whether it's accurate or indeed meaningful.
100%, Martin. 100%, and we can be confident that after this, I'll put up a post of what analysts are saying about this. Share analysts are saying about REA and the possible turn that it may take. I mean, you have to read between the lines of what they're saying, and it's no different to what you and I have been saying with regards to REA and Domain, looking very closely at the real estate industry and being prepared to eat our lunch, but by way of taking over the industry as direct actors in more or less being pseudo agencies, and the real estate industry working, or the real estate agents working for them as contractors on a fee for service. But you only get these notions and you only get this understanding when you look at the other side of their equation, because they've got a responsibility to the shareholders, and like we've been saying in our commentary and in our posts for months now, is that watch this space, because as there are less transactions and there are less properties being transacted and being sold and being put on the market for sale, well, the marketing revenues and that's the way that these portals make money, are becoming less and less, which means that the shareholders are going to be disgruntled because they're not making as much, or the shares aren't worth as much. So they're eyeing out the $15 billion green pasture on the other side of that fence. But we don't hear about that. We don't see those articles, right? They're not pushing it out. Tom Panos isn't pushing it out. REA isn't pushing it out just yet, and Domain are certainly not pushing it out just yet, because they still need the industry, and therefore they will be talking about and spruiking, everything's crashing and crumbling, or everything's going great and hunky-dory, and therefore at the end of the day, whether it's crushing and crumbling, whether everything's hunky-dory, at the end of the day, the call is list your property on the market, because it's, if you don't list it now, you're not going to get the price that you would otherwise get later on with the mortgage cliff. If you list it now, you're going to get a mozza for it now, blah blah blah. It's all about listings. It's all about marketing revenue. It's all about keeping the industry going, because without commissions, without sales, the industry suffers, and it's the industry that's paying the $2.4 billion annualized of marketing across those two portals, right? So yeah, you got to follow the money.
Absolutely, follow the money indeed. Now, as we come towards the end of the show, and a quick hello to Tony Lecantra who dropped in. Tony, looking forward to the show in a couple of weeks. Should be fun. Here's a final question from Cookie Boy, Edwin, which you might quite find quite interesting. And the reason I brought it up was because next week I've actually got Veronica Morgan on, and so we're going to talk about property prices in Sydney next week on the show live. So join us for that. But what's your thoughts about granny flats, good or bad? Veronica hates them.
Veronica. Well, I can't talk. I can't talk too bad about your one of your favorites, Martin. But what's my thought on granny flats? If they're built properly, if they're managed well, and if they are, it's a better option than living in an apartment, right? And it's when you see makeshift granny flats that I've got issues with. When you see granny flats that aren't don't give the privacy that they're meant to give. I've got issues. I've got issues with that, and the boundaries between the main household and the granny flat dwelling, they're blurred, and then you're up in with a lot of strife. We've got no option at the moment, and it's the quickest. You can get a granny flat approved and built within 3 months. It's a quick option for the alternatives that we've got now. In previous years, when Cookie Boy and I used to do the rounds and look at different parts of Sydney and drive around and look at what was happening and what was coming. We would look at how many areas were being overbuilt, but that was before the pandemic. That was before the lever, the immigration lever was being prepared to be pulled in 2019. That was when we had 18,000 plus rental listings on the market. That was when we had 24,000 plus for sale listings across the Sydney region in Domain. So look, there's from our personal discussions that Cookie Boy and I had back in the day in Blacktown to now, some of the points of view that we shared back then over a coffee would be a bit different. But what's the alternative? What alternative are we giving? Single mothers? What alternative? And Cookie Boy will understand this. What alternative are we giving households that have got pets like Dusty and Evan and Prince, and they're going to be, and they can't be in a in an apartment. New apartment development, and those that have sprung up all over Blacktown. There's, I don't see any other alternatives, and I think we'll see a lot more of that. From keeping the families, extended families close by. There are blocks of land that are big enough to accommodate that. Where your mate Veronica lives in the eastern suburbs, of course they don't want granny flats there because they want to maintain the high value of the individual dwellings and keep your 750, 800 square metre blocks of land there and so forth. There are different reasons, why different people don't want things. They're my reasons for my stamp of approval at the moment in many areas, and I wish I could see more in the North Shore and in the Upper North Shore, because there are families in the North Shore and in the Upper North Shore that have grown up there, and not by their fault, that they haven't got anywhere to retire to, and when they sell, and they can't downsize, but if they could downsize into a granny flat, they would sell their they're bigger, they're old, and not well maintained homes that could that could accommodate a younger family, a growing younger family, and that could move into a granny flat. But yeah, look, I'm for it because there's no alternative, and if the immigration keeps on, as you and I say, keeps on growing the way it's growing, uh, I'd you know I'd you know I'd push a lot more for granny flats than some of the stuff that I've seen, the makeshift dwellings and accommodations that I've seen that have been rented out. It's horrific.
Absolutely, and I think that Edwin, both you and I have a view that things have gone from bad to worse in recent times. That the solutions that are being offered by particularly the federal government are probably not appropriate, and we need to find some alternative paths, because otherwise society is going to crumble at the edges, and the homeless, become more and more of an important question. And I also think the intergenerational questions, which we haven't touched on directly tonight, which I see all the time, means that there are a lot younger people coming through who will never be able to do what some of the older people did. But we've also got some of the older generations who are now, in property that's way too big for them, but they can't necessarily find anything that would actually allow them to move out and down. So this whole thing is a mess, but it's a policy mess created over 30, 40 years. It ain't going to get fixed by just a resolution held between the states and the feds this week. It's not going to magically fix anything. So I think things are going to get worse before they get better.
Yeah, and as you and I say, unfortunately, things have got to break before you can mend it.
Yeah.
And that's why, look, be first cab off the rank to initiate that closer ties and closer relationship with your property managers. Yes, there's going to be pain, but the pain that you're going to be feeling now, is a lot less, in my opinion, from what's around the corner. And nothing's really going to change, even if they come up with some sort of resolution. Nothing. At the end of the day, we still don't have the dwellings, regardless of even if they bring about a rental freeze, if that's mandated. Along with that is your minimum standards. To reiterate and sort of recap on what we discussed. You've got to understand you've got your minimum standards. You've got your insurance companies that will not insure individual landlords as much as our property manager friend that you put up the post before says that it's only got to do with strata. That's bullshit. These are I'm talking to property managers. I'm trying to help them out now to navigate through those policies that have been rejected by the insurers. And I've got them on hand. So to make blanket statements that it's only to do with strata, don't believe her. But all these things are coming closer. This steam engine that's got no brakes, is this locomotive that's got no brakes, is coming closer and closer. So you're better off crossing that bridge now then later on when that locomotive picks up a lot more speed and has the potential to do a lot more greater damage. So this is why I say, start building those relationships with your property managers now. Reach out now, and start preparing, because, as you said, Martin, things are going to get worse. They're not breaking yet, and things have got to break before they mend. And these policies and anything that the government does, best case scenario in my mind is before we start seeing something productive is 3 years. Until then, there's a lot of pain to go through yet.
Absolutely, Edwin. Well, thank you very much for your time on the live show tonight. Appreciate that after doing the rant yesterday, and I know the audience have been enjoying the conversations. I've been watching some of the other chat, which I didn't put up. But thank you very much. We'll put some links and things below if you want to contact Edwin directly. And we'll do another live rant next Monday. So thank you, Edwin. I'm going to take you off stream, and I'll finish the show.
All the best, Martin. Take care.
See ya. Take care. So there you are, folks. Hope you enjoyed that. And just to tell you that next week, Veronica Morgan will be on. We'll be talking specifically about some of the issues that she's focused on, buyers agents, first-time buyers, and also Sydney property. So that should be fun. And the week after that, Tony Locantro is coming back to talk again about some of the things that he's seeing. So that should be fun too. And just before I go, let me show you that the dogs are still sound asleep. They've been wandering around a bit, but pretty much sound asleep again. So they really enjoyed the show, clearly. And I want to say thank you very much for spending this evening with us. Hope you enjoyed it. And I'll look forward to seeing you next week. This is Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, signing off. Cheerio.